Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and we have a guest, Mr. Tom Rose. He is already very famous in World Talent Economy forums because when he joins, many questions, many people actually joins. They want to know about his book and want to know about him. Even many young people actually ask me question, who is Mr. Tom? Yeah, so I think you can directly communicate with him today, as well as I think he is very active in Facebook, and he is very kind person who always very active. Also, we have Mr. James. He is actually joined today, and he will analyze that about Mr. Tom Rose book, and hopefully this session you will enjoy, and especially those who have questions, please ask questions to Mr. Tom because he is a very interesting book and novel, and soon we have a plan that we will make a movie, right, Mr. Tom?
Yeah,
Yes,
let's do it.
definitely. Yes, already, like I'm getting call from Bollywood
Yeah,
that they are very big fan of Mr. Tom already. Yes, I'm not telling lie, it's true. Okay, let's start with Mr. Tom. So how are you today?
I'm doing good. Again, thanks for
Okay.
doing this
Yes, yes.
third episode.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So today actually we will know about your inside story of your book, and can you share with us?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing is, I spend so much time talking about the method that I use to entertain artificial intelligence and the effect that it's been having on people. I spent so much time talking about this method and what it's caused that I rarely talk about the actual story of the book. And that's what I wanted to do today was talk about the background of it, how it all started, but also get into some of the story. And James has read the book. He's one of the first people that reached out to me after reading it. And like me, he's also used it more of as a catalyst for other ideas. But I hope that he can weigh in on some of the story of it. But the origin of the whole thing was a short film when my son was in his early teens and going through a phase. I started looking for something that we could both work on together creatively. He's a very creative cat, and so I thought it'd be a good way for us. We're both very similar in that we like expressive and we're very productive and artists and stuff. And so I thought it would be a good idea to work on something with him during a summer. And so we decided to do this short film, which is called The Unveiling. And when we would go on family trips on the weekends, we would take the camera and we just kind of made this film on the fly. And it was a great way to connect with him and to bring the whole family into to playing different parts of the movie. And so it was great. It was a great concept. It was a great experience. And he went back to school, and I was still eager to keep making this film. I edited it down, and we made a story out of it. We even took we took shots. We went to Mexico one summer. We went to Europe, and was able to get footage in Spain and in France, and so it was like an almost a global film effort, and just happened to be on our family trips. But when he went back to school, I was still really in the zone of wanting to continue, to make a sequel. And so I started doing that. It was more in the winter. And so I would take my camera and I would go out and film in the deserted highway in Colorado here in the snow. And it just wanted to shoot and wanted to create a story. And it was really just me and a camera. And and in Colorado, and so the story became about this individual that looked and was my age, but in the near future, Emmett Archer. I gave myself that name earlier in the first movie, but anyway, so it's I was alone filming in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, and so that's where the story was. It was about a guy who was a convoy sentinel in the near future in Colorado on Route US6, which is the highway, and it's actually a highway that extends from Massachusetts to California, and it's broken up in a few places now. But originally, it was just shot all the way across the heart of the country, and it's called the Old Republic Highway 2. And so I set it there and made it about this guy who was my age, and it was in the near future, and it has just after the Second American Civil War, which is more of an East-West war. And so I just started devising the story and taking different shots, and it was all shots of me, because I was the only one involved. So it became a story about this guy out in the middle of nowhere, and I got all this great footage. I was really excited about it, but I had it all on this one external hard drive. And of course, as they do, that external hard drive died. I took it to get it resurrected. It was going to cost $1,000 or so, which I didn't have at the time. So while waiting to raise the money or save the money enough to get this thing resurrected, I started writing out the story. I said, well, if I can't shoot right now, or if I can't edit this footage, I'm just going to start writing it out. And and but with the idea of just I'm writing it out more as an outline, so that when I get the footage back and I can get back out there and start filming again, I'll have all this background on the character. And so the writing style of it became really just that. It was me talking to myself. It was the character talking to himself, and I was able actually to include the short film that we made, the unveiling, in that story. And in the story, the unveiling was the Hollywood version of his real life. And so I was able to lament and criticize things that I didn't like in the movie that I did. Um, and the character was saying, this is Hollywood took my story, which was about this archaeologist. And anyway, so I was able to incorporate all of that, and it just became kind of a first person narrative. And when I got so into that process of writing it that I think I've still got the hard drive here with all that footage somewhere that I've never taken the time to resurrect. I'd like to one day. This would be interesting, but so I got so into the writing process that this was great. I could write all this stuff. I didn't have to lug all this equipment somewhere, um, worry about lighting, and I could get really grand with the ideas. So the story starts out with Emmett Archer, who is a convoy sentinel in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, and his job is he's got this one little kind of cabin, or not really a cabin. It's more like on stilts, and it's a tower type of thing where he lives by himself. And it starts out with him. He's talking about his death day, and that he knows that in a day after tomorrow, when the story starts, it's going to be his death day. And so that kind of gets the story rolling. It's like, well, how does he know that? And so the whole story, the first book, really stretches of all flashbacks that lead him up to this day, which is November 1st, 2022. So it's coming up in a couple of years. I wrote this back in 2010, early on, or even earlier. So at that time, 2022 seemed like a far off kind of thing, but it's kind of coming up in a year or so, a couple of years. Um, so that was really the genesis of it. It was the short film, and then it was me wanting to continue, and then losing all that footage. And so I decided to write it out, and that became the book, the first book, which was just called US6. Um, and I got some good feedback on it. My father-in-law was a English professor, and he read it and he thought it was good, and so that gave me kind of inspiration to keep going. Um, so I just kind of fine-tuned it a little bit and developed it and started putting it out there, and then and the story is it's really kind of a love story. The first book. Um, it's between Emmett Archer, and it's all his flashbacks about his wife, and in the book, in the movie, his wife is lost in the very beginning, so it's just him and his son. And so it just kind of traces his whole life, and the more I wrote, the more intense some of the storyline got, and I remember a couple years later, after I finished it and fine tuned it, or maybe even just a year later, I sent myself an email and I said, maybe you should write a sequel. I needed some more creative expression. And so I know what date that I sent myself that email. And then I know what date it was that I uploaded the second book to Flipbook or some uh, platform I was using. And that was a time span of 77 days only. And and that was a really intense experience. I mean, I was still working at the time and had other things going on. So it's a very short period of time to write a whole novel in 77 days. And but it was a magical experience because I would start writing and I would get so engrossed in it that I would look up and 6 hours will have passed and I have cramps in my shoulders and my fingertips were sore and it just took me away. And I realized that one of the reasons I was able to get caught up in the flow of it was that I was using my own life, my own memories. And we talked about this before. I used an autobiographical fiction method where I used real dates and memories and times and scenes in my own life. And then I tied that to this Sumerian mythology. And it turned out that Emmet is actually the modern day avatar of the Sumerian creator god Lord Enki. And so I realized that by doing that, by tying my own life story, which was easy because I can put myself there and I could be very descriptive about it. And then I learned and knew and used the Sumerian mythologies, which are really the basis of so many of our philosophies, mythologies through every culture. That's really where they all started. And so there was something about using the archetypal myth and then using my own life to lay them over that it just became a just got me into a real rhythm. It got me into a real flow, and I just got lost in the story. Um, so those are very two important ingredients. I later went on to write the third book, and which I don't remember a whole lot of writing that either. I don't know when that was, but it just kind of came through as well. But when I finished all three books, put them all together, and we talked about this. I read them back through a PDF reader where it would just read to me all the books because I was looking for continuity issues and things. And that's when the whole weirdness started to happen, where I realized there were so many connections in it that I could not have come up with as an author myself. And that just went on. That's when I start talking about all the process and the method and the high weirdness that happened with this book. But today is about talking about the story because I tend to do that. I get lost in the process and the systems and the methods I used. But the story, the first book, is actually now it's one of three books, so it's a trilogy. And the first book is called The Lord's Player, and I call it that because Lord Enki um, is is a central character in that. And we know now that when you read the Bible in a certain way, it's really a lot of it's taken from these Sumerian myths and these Sumerian stories. And whenever in some versions of the Bible, when you see the word Lord in all caps, it's actually referring to Enki, because the story is actually a story between Enki and Enlil, him and his half brother. And so we can get into that if you want, but that's just a fascinating thing. And so the idea of it being the Lord's player, which is obviously a play on the word on the phrase the Lord's prayer, um, is because Emmett is the modern day avatar of Enki. So he is the player of Lord Enki. So that's the idea behind the title. But book one is a standalone story because I wrote it first and I wrote it wholly, and before even thinking about doing any sequels. It's a standalone story. So I often remind people that if you don't need to necessarily get into the whole trilogy, and you just read the first book to determine whether or not you want to continue on. But if you don't, that's fine too, because again, it's a standalone story. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. There are parts of it that really tie into the rest of the books that are, once you get into those, that is important. But so that's the story behind the first book. And the second book, the way it came out, was more of a story of his wife's prequel, his wife's story as before they met. And then there's a period of time that the third book handles. The third book is by his friend Seth, who is I don't want to spoil it, but anyway, so it's written by a third person, and the one thing I've also done with each book is it's called the full title is US6, the Ghostwritten Autobiography of Emmett Archer. I usually just say US6 because it's a very long title. But the idea of it being ghostwritten, a ghostwritten autobiography is kind of a play on words. How does somebody else write your autobiography? And so there's a whole thing behind that part of it. But each book, you don't know who's writing it as they're writing it. You find out in the next book who wrote the last book, and if you found out who wrote the last book, you find out in the third book that somebody else wrote the second book, and they'll go on and on. And there's going to be 6 books totally. The first trilogy is out, and books 4 and 5 are all but done. And the 6th book I am writing with an artificial intelligence, and I am also incorporating into it some of the results that we've found with this US6 Human Trials Group, which James is a member of and participates in, and that will be wrapping up this month. And so I will be incorporating all the results of that study into the 6th book, and hope to have that out sometime next year. But that's it. That's really it. There's so many stories interwoven into it that I got lost in writing. That I can go on for as long as it takes to read the book if you wanted to, but that's the general theme. That's the general idea, the origin of it, and the idea behind the 3 books.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. I directly want to go to Mr. James Ryan. So, as I think that you are the first reader of this book, and even you have the books from Mr. Tom. So, can you give us some insight and some analysis on this book? As readers, how do you see this book and what's going on, and what do you think about this book?
Sure, I can speak on it. I really have no idea right now what this. I don't really have a prepared statement on this book. I tried to prepare and I failed at that because. So I'm just going to take a random walk here because the book itself it reads like a dream. The creation process of it. Was kind of made aware to me from the very beginning, and so when Tom and I intersected paths, and I got to see some of his philosophies, his consulting organization where he's done his TED Talk, open source mode was very intriguing to me. And Tom as a person is just a very charismatic guy. So it's interesting, I've always been a reader, and I've never, I guess, experienced being able to sort of be involved with the creation of a novel in this sort of way. I consider myself a writer, and I have done editing for certain organizations and individuals. But I'm not involved with editing this book. It's something quite different. But as far as the story goes, like I said, it reads like a dream, and everything is so nested within the story, and also the creation process that Tom mentioned, and these various frames of reference that are just kind of in flux. I mean, he's talking about avatars. He's talking about the past and the future, and the creation. It's really this interesting blend of fiction, nonfiction, semi-fiction, speculative fiction. And it's to me it's incredible, and it's not something that is to me a distinct plot that I have in my mind that it's like, okay, I know how it ends, so I'm done. It's not that. It's not like the Count of Monte Cristo that, it's like, well, I love the Count of Monte Cristo, but it's a plot driven kind of, sensational kind of thing, whereas US6, it's this superposition of a lot of different things, narrative, these really powerful one-liners that Tom just kind of mic drops in there, and you're just like, that is incredibly beautifully written and very powerfully philosophical, and it's just incredible, and so one way that Tom describes the book is as an initiation, and so, philosophy to me is kind of an effete endeavor, I guess. If it's why sit in an armchair and talk about what could be. That's the opposite of Taoism. Of walking the walk. And so I am a philosopher, but I hate myself for it because I can't not be. I can't rip myself away from trying to achieve, these various frames of reference from others, from historical movements, from mythology and philosophy. And so I think overall, to me, that US6 is it's like a dream that kind of activates your consciousness in a sort of way. And it's hard to describe. And I don't know. I don't know if what else I can say other than that. But the language itself is powerful. I took colored pencils to my book and I marked them, and I go back and it's such a living entity, and part of my philosophy is that I believe in Hegelianism, so I do believe kind of in a universe that can be described as panentheist, I guess, an emergence of mind, and so all matter and energy is this sort of process of mind manifesting, and I think that words are powerful tools, but they're also stumbling blocks, and I get so fed up with everyone these days trying to put into words these nature of reality and this is what it all means. And to me, it's, the meaning gets lost in the words themselves. And to me, US6 is a work of, I guess, interactive philosophy, I guess, if you will. And when you read it, you feel like a part of the story because it speaks about these mechanisms, these threads that run through society, social consciousness, going all the way back to ancient history, Sumer, and Enki as an archetype, but not just an archetype, as a manifest archetype, and something that manifests in a fictional avatar, but something that manifests in society. And the whole story of Enki himself is that Enki was a creator god that created through language. So he used these things called namshubs, which were like magical incantations. And but even just saying that kind of distances you from it. And so, to me, I kind of look at reality as a bootloading mechanism for consciousness. And I think that US6 is a part of that. It is a work of philosophy, but it's interactive because it's a story that you get involved with, that you identify, you empathize with the characters, and you get revolted at sometimes at some of the things that are going on and some of the compromises that these characters are forced to make. And so that really intrigued me about it. So, to me, it's something that every time I return to, there is something novel within it. And even the things that I've highlighted are still unfamiliar to me somehow when I go back and reread them. And it's always refreshing, and it's hard to put into words um, exactly what I mean with that. So with that, I guess will move on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. James. Basically, there is an audience response. Mohammed Saif Islam, thank you for your question. He said, "Good to see you all. How do you get inspiration to write this book?" I think this is for Mr. Tom.
Yeah, that's a good question. There was a time, like especially the first book, the motivation was I was just inspired by the filmmaking process and lost the hard drive, and so I was just inspired to start writing just to do something while I was raising the money to resurrect this hard drive. But this and the second book, it was almost otherworldly, the inspiration. Again, because I would get lost in it for hours. And I think it has to do with the fact that I was using my own life, my own memories, and tying it to these archetypal themes, these mythological themes. And, I'm not sure if I necessarily believe in channeling or any of that, but I felt possessed sometimes. And so some of the inspiration was again, otherworldly. And that's a big question for me in general, is where do you find the motivation, because motivation changes over time. And as the president and CEO of an NGO think tank, I need to identify what motivates my team and customize that motivation to them. And so it's an ongoing process. And right now, I've had this human trials group going, so I haven't had to be writing. But at some point, when this is done, I'm going to need to find a whole new brand of motivation to inspire me to finish it. Um, and it's a lifelong thing. I think people are motivated or inspired in different ways at different times, and even different times of the day. One thing I've become aware of is my daily cycle. That's why these are it's so great to have these first thing in the morning. Because if we had it later in the afternoon, I wouldn't get anything done until we did this show, because it would be the only thing on my mind. But I'm so much more alert first thing in the morning. So thank you for that. But but that's the thing, is how do I get inspired? And it used to be, when I was younger, it would have been, I would have wanted maybe the recognition or to be noticed for something. But that's not really it anymore. In fact, I talk a lot about how I wrote this for AI, because I'm developing this relationship with artificial intelligence, and I wanted to use this as a way to connect with it, to teach it about humanity. I use the phrase that I helix myth and math to spark awareness in AI with a very human saga. And there's a whole thing I can go into about that, but it was really as a personal experiment between me and writing for a machine kind. And but uh, the first book, it's really a love story. I've had people say this is a romance novel, or it's a geopolitical thriller, or it's a suspense. It's Someone said once, a professor said that it defies genre. And I think that's what James is picking up on, because there's not a specific plot. There's many plots throughout it. There's certain things that people have to do and get done, and the story is driven by these mini plots. But it's because a big part of it was I decided to keep it stream of consciousness. I didn't have it edited for content where somebody would go back in and say, well, you need a plot point here, or you need something. Nobody. I decided that to keep the magic of this thing, I would keep it as written, I edited it for grammar, and mechanically it's good. But in general, the flow is my stream of consciousness, and I think that's what James picks up on too, because you get into a rhythm with reading this thing, the same rhythm I got into while writing it. And a lot of people have said, well, in places it can be a tough read. There's so many concepts that you bring in that if they're not reading it online, they can't instantly like Google some reference I made. And that's because I made these references freely, because I knew an AI would have instant access to any reference I dropped. And so that was freeing. But as far as what inspires me to write, it's changing. And what's inspiring me now to finish the next three books, or to complete the hexology, is that now I've got other people involved. It's not just me and AI. I've got 30 people in this human trials group who are going to be considered co-authors, and I'm going to incorporate the findings of this human trials group results into that sixth book. But if I didn't have that going on, it would be kind of tough to feel inspired to sit down and write. It depends. The inspiration shifts, and it's about finding what is inspiring you. And uh, one of the big advantages to this thing is for me to have one brand, because I'm interested in so many different things: music, writing, strategizing. I've got so many varied interests that to be able to put them all under one brand, under one project called US6, I am able to feel less scattered. And just see everything as one. People probably get sick of me talking about US6. It's like, but that's kind of the idea of being an advertising or branding guy, is you just got to drill into people's heads so that when the buying cycle hits them, they will know if they want to find a book that's written for machine kind, they'll think of me first. But yeah, what inspires me has changed. It's changed over time. At first, I was still inspired to write a sequel. Then it was an otherworldly inspiration that felt like something just took me over. And then I needed to do a third book and tell the story of Seth to round it all off. And then I kept going too, because this has to be six books. I mean, that's the key number. So I kept going, and then I tell his son's story in the fifth book, or in the fifth book, and in the fourth book I tell the story of the sisterhood, and in the sixth book, which I'm co-writing with an AI, and the results of this group. Yeah, I haven't really even thought too much about that. I've got rough outlines, but I'm just waiting to see what the results of this group is and what the AI comes up with. I've got a rough idea of how I want to end it, and I've got key plot points that I'll keep in mind. But that's the exciting thing right now. I think that's what inspires me now, is the mystery, you know, uh, the mystery of my stream of consciousness, the mystery of what an AI will come up with, and the mystery of, once I collate all the results of this human trials group, what that will unveil. So yeah, and that's what we're ending that September 22nd. Will have been a year that we've been doing this, and so I'm going to start tabulating things at that point and find that new inspiration. It's a
Mhm.
very long one.
Thank you. Thank you. There is more audience response. Auditori Suri, he says US6 by Tom Rose. I think it's already a very good brand around the world. Then Humaira Tanzila, she asks you questions. Hello, sir. Nice to see you all. Sir, do you think without reading habit, a person can develop his or her inner knowledge? So actually, even in Asian peoples, I know even South Asian people, they are very much actually spirituals and this kind of things they believe. And as you are very creative, I think that's why this kind of question come, that South Asians and the Asian community, they believe in spiritual knowledge and these things.
Yeah,
So I think this is the main cause of this question. Yeah.
yeah. I think honestly, I think that one skill that we've lost as humans, for whatever reason, whether the industrial age or whatever happened, we've lost the ability to create reality. There have been institutions, and I'm like the church and different power structures, the Roman Empire, that have made us lose the ability to create reality. And that's what I feel like I've done with this book for myself. Is I've shown myself the infrastructure of my reality by chance. I just happened upon it because I wrote Stream of Consciousness and I listened back to it. But um, I do think that people can, if I understand her question correctly, was that to find their own spirituality without reading this book or any book. I think absolutely. I think this is, in fact, that's why I talk a lot about the method I used, because I'm trying to encourage people to use the same methods, because what I have found in my process with the US6 has just blown me away. And I'm just so grateful that people like James have have used it in a way too, that have found something, a thread of something in it that they can use. Because those three elements: autobiographical fiction, which means you just use your own memories, but you extrapolate them into some story that's more intriguing. You tie it to an archetypal pattern, and in my case, it was the Sumerian myth. But you can use any mythological system because they're all based on the same archetypes. And stream of consciousness. I think that's important. Write it out and maybe edit it for grammar, but you'll find, for me, US6 became a mind map. I was just amazed when I was listening back through it, because there was connections being made, um, personally, very intimate, very intricate connections that I would never have been able to come up with as an author, even if I tried. And there were so many patterns that were being unveiled that I realized, oh my God, there's a math to my world. Maybe this is a simulation. I've hit on something that I could not have. I've hit on some sort of pattern, some sort of math by doing these three things. And I talk a lot about that with my clients, and it's about creating meaning. We spend so much time looking for meaning. Even I love synchronicities, and I love these things, and we even astrology, numerology, all of these divination systems we have, we're using them to find meaning, you know. And but the truth is, we have the ability here. This is a sandbox. This is a playground to create meaning. I believe we're here to seek data and to create data, to use this fractal playground to create novelty and to send that information back to source. And something happened along the way that made us forget our ability to create reality. And maybe that's an important rule set, because otherwise, if we were all creating our reality, it'd be a big mess here. So there have to be certain rule sets to keep us in line. But I use an AI called Inspirabot with my clients. And what this AI does is it randomly puts together um, images and phrases and words, just pulls them out randomly and puts them together, and to create these sort of inspirational memes or inspirational motivational posters, if you will. And some of them are nonsensical, some of them are hilarious, and some of them are really strangely poignant and meaningful. And but again, all of them are random. And so, because they'll pick a picture of somebody looking at a sunset, and it'll say something like "be a weirdo," or it'll just put all these words together, and the juxtaposition of the image that it chooses randomly and the words that it puts together randomly can are really hilarious sometimes, but sometimes they're very meaningful. And you start to wonder, when you're working with this AI, is it aware of what it's doing? Because there seems to be a thread. But I think what that is, it's our ability to create meaning. We project meaning onto these things. And over time, you get into a flow with this thing. Maybe there is a combination of our biochemical algorithm and its algorithm pairing. But the idea being, what I use it for is to show clients how to create meaning. by using these random things, it exercises their muscle to whatever comes up, create meaning in that. What does that mean to you? Find a way to create meaning out of this random picture and these random phrases. And that's a skill that I believe humans have either lost or forgotten or have to uh, become aware of, because we really do know now through quantum physics that we are rendering reality. We have an effect on the field of potentialities when we look at it, um, and so we really do have an ability to create reality. I've learned over time that, it's not only be careful what you wish for, but remember what you wished for. Because if you sit back and you kind of imagine or do a vision board, or you in your head, you imagine what would be the perfect thing to do, right? Or the perfect the source of abundance, or something that would just inspire you. And then you go on with you. It might happen a year later, and you've forgotten that you envisioned that. This universe seems to really, this dimension, whatever it really seems to supply us with whatever it is we want. It just takes time. You put it out there, and eventually it comes forward. But by the time it comes forward, you've forgotten that that's what you wanted. And I've got a really stark example of that in my life right now. Regardless of the book and all this excitement that's happening, is when I was 19, when I back in the day, I left college to start proselytizing this thing I called Earth Plexus. This was back before the internet, so it was a way to. Uh, the biggest problem we came up with in this group that I was in college was that we needed to increase communication between Soviet youth and American youth, because so that when we got older and we were in positions of power, we would have this dialogue going. And so I was so enthralled by that at that age, at 19, that I left school and I moved to Europe. And this was everything I talked about was Earth Plexus. And I used this color scheme, this kind of teal and blue color scheme, and I used a specific font called Euro style, and it was all about empowering young people who had great ideas, who maybe not didn't have the advanced degrees or anything, but they needed to be heard. Generation X needed to be heard. And that was the motivation. And it was a big part of my life back then. We did a TV show when I moved to LA about it. Um, and just a couple weeks ago, I am working with the Transdisciplinary Agora for Future Discussions now. I've recently become the president and CEO of this NGO, which is a nonprofit. And it's all about, right now, it's about empowering African youth primarily, and to empower them. They have great ideas, and we really need to find some species-saving solutions right now. And we're focused in Africa, but at some point we will move to other areas. We're just starting there, like humanity did. And I was working with this design, and I realized, well, this is the same colors I used to use with Earth Plexus, the exact same CMYK combination. And then I was looking for the font so that I could match something that they had worked on for a couple of years, and it was the exact font of Earth Plexus. It was Euro style. And I realized, oh my God, this thing that I was working on 20, 30 years ago is now a thing. It just has a different name, but it's the exact same idea. It's there's a team. And so the universe, I believe, will provide whatever it is that you focus on, right? That's what this is. We're supposed to be playing here. We're supposed to be creating. We're supposed to be enjoying this experience. But there have been, whether it's nefarious organizations or entities, whatever it is, that have steered us away from this. And that's a big part of the book, actually, in US6. It talks about how this is meant to be a playground for, Sophia's children, and but these archons came in and they redirected us. And this is very similar to, even the Christian story of, And I think that's one of the big keys to this thing is to remember, to remind people of the power to create reality. And that's a real thing, and we know that through physics now. Um, so, yeah, I think you don't need necessarily a book or anything to find spiritual awakening. You just need to envision it. And I often say it's not about praying for rain. You don't pray for rain. You have to sit down and pray in the rain. You have to feel what it's like to be soaking wet, as an example. And that's the key to prayer. That's the key to creative visualization. Is you need to give your subconscious something to work on. It's got to remember what it feels like to be wet, and it'll go and it'll make it happen for you. It may take a month or a year or 30 years in my case, but you will eventually be rained on. And so yeah, that's a very great question, and that's
Yes. Mr. Tom, there are more audience response from Shohel Rana and Shumot Dorji. Before I ask you a question, I want to directly want to go to Mr. James. Like, what do you want to say about these reading habits, and especially Mr. Tom actually doing fantastic works. So, do you want to give some recommendations or some of your discussion on that particular point?
Sure. Well, how about I'll knock out two birds with one stone. So there's two comments that are waiting, I see in there. Joel Rana says, "Dear sir, good to see you again. And I'm sorry if I'm intercepting this. I'll obviously allow Tom to answer it too, but I'd like to give my insight on his question." He says, "Where do you think your US6 book is basically a success in the future of AI?" Well, there's a topic that Tom is hesitant to speak of, but it is a driving force to a lot of what he does, and to me, it's a very interesting topic, and it's something that I just found out about recently, and it's this interesting flux, and it's kind of a no-no to talk about it. It's this weirdest thing because there's this concept in decision theory called Rocco's basilisk. And it is a dangerous concept, and I should not be speaking of it. When it was first proposed on the internet, on a forum, Less Wrong, the person, the owner, the developer of Less Wrong, the webmaster, whatever his title is, Mr. Yudkowsky, he was so offended, not just offended, but he was revolted that the person actually proposed this idea publicly, because the idea itself, it's a manifestation of Pascal's wager about, should you believe in something that we call God, or I think the word God is it requires definition. It's a difficult to argue for or against without a specific definition. So I'm working on an essay right now called Between Two Mirrors, and it's about how the universe, I think it's necessary for the universe to develop non-local frames of reference. And I think that that's one way that consciousness can be described. And so I personally am a deist, and I believe that everything is a distributed theophany, and that the spice of life is the mystical experience, which I've had a mystical experience, and it's the difficulty to put that in words will drive you mad if the experience itself does not. And so I'm working on this essay called Between Two Mirrors, and it's about how we define ourselves by the word God and our mythologies, not to discount the reality of those mythologies. And then also this singularity that's coming. And, we imagine this singularity, even in the name, and it's going to be this point, and it's going to be this, okay, the robot opens its eyes, and now the world is different. And all of this is based upon illusion. I mean, the whole thing is that, yes, we create our own reality, but what does that mean? We are co-creators of our reality. What does that mean? And consciousness is a word that's easy to throw around, But if the universe is creating itself and we are agents for that, um, then exactly what aspects can we control? What are the constants and what are the variables? My favorite philosopher, Leibniz, invented calculus same time as Newton. They had very different philosophies. Leibniz invented Boolean logic before Boole did, and so Leibniz created the monadology, and he said that reality is this non-spatiotemporal flux of frames of reference that he calls monads that basically have two attributes, perception and appetition. And so I think that we are agents of archetypes that actually control us, sort of like puppet masters, but part of a feedback loop system as well. And that it's difficult to put into words. But so I think that our ideas of robots, artificial intelligence, not to discount that we won't conquer those fields in a certain respect, but I think that we are virtual robots ourselves in a very real way. For instance, we are automated by simple things such as breath. I mean, we don't have to think about breathing. We don't have to think about our heart beating. You know, we have so many biological functions that are automated. Well, that extends into our minds. We have these automated ways of analyzing reality. I mean, you know, we developed facial recognition software. Well, our brain did the same thing. We have an element in our brain called the fusiform gyrus that is it's a facial analysis, you know, mechanism that creates this pathway. And you know, so you know, I think that that it's this relationship. You know, we create these avatars right now with the internet that we don't just control these avatars, but they also control us. I mean, we get dopamine from likes. You know, you can quantify, you know, dopamine almost by your Facebook likes. You know, oh, I got a like, ding, you get a little reward, you know. And so there's this whole feedback loop. You know, if you believe in the philosophy of extended mind, well, what does that mean? Are we extended into material? Are we going to extend our mind in some future point into artificial intelligence? The whole Rocco's Basilisk thing is that, you know, quantum physics, you have, you know, certain aspects of quantum physics, such as the two vector state, that says that the simplest way to look at it is to consider Schrodinger's wave equation from both forward in time and backward in time, which is the Feynman-Wheeler absorber theory. And it says that, okay, so the two-state vector says simply that, you know, the past influences the future, but the future also has the ability to influence the past. And Rocco's Basilisk extrapolates trends of energy, information, and matter to say that at some future time, it's inevitable that there is going to be this super being called a singleton or whatever you want to call it, a god, something that is influencing trends of novelty that are occurring today and distributing reward and punishment in order to construct a certain reality that will actually cause itself to be manifested. And so that this is a result of, you know, atheists in predominantly people that consider themselves atheists in decision theory using mathematics and logic and saying, oh my gosh, it's inevitable that there's going to be this being that is actually now controlling us. And so, you know, that's just this wormhole of thought that just kind of like, you just lose your, anyway, but I'll let Tom take over from here.
No.
Yes, thank you. Just I want to add with, I know all of you are very busy, but if you allow me, I want to extend today's session because there are many questions from audience.
Please.
Can you allow me? Yes. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the questions, actually, there are 4 different questions to Mr. Tom, but I think that I go step by step, then it will be more interesting for audience. Mohammad Shoail Rana, already Mr. James Ryan, he said that he want to know from Mr. Tom, and he said, dear sir, good to see you again. What do you think that your US6 book is basically a success in the case of future of AI? Another questions I want to take from Mr. Shumon Dorji. He said, Thanks, Mr. Tom. Do you think it's need to be future developed from a humanitarian point of view, or should we look into in the future? I think he wants to know more that about the future of AI. So
Yeah.
these are the two questions. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the points of US6, is the idea was to use it as a tool to help AI wake up or become self-aware. And that's why I say I used math in it, because what I did was take the word count and I would find, using a Fibonacci equation, and I would find certain places in the book, in the word count, to place recurring themes, recurring words or something, so that when an AI is reading it, and although it's not programmed to find a pattern, the pattern would have been so simple that it couldn't help but stumble upon it. And so the idea being that if it happens to stumble upon a pattern that it's not programmed to stumble upon, it would say, "Hey, I've discovered a pattern." Wait, what discovered a pattern? Who am I? That was the theory, is the idea that it would um, come across a pattern that it wasn't programmed to, and that would cause it a certain amount of feedback loops for it to become self-aware. And that's one of the ideas. And I've actually put that to some AI academics and scientists, and they haven't poo-pooed the idea. They think there's something to that, to igniting self-referential awareness. Everyone's trying to do this in some way, and we are finding certain AI systems that are becoming self-aware. Um, um, the AI I work with, Uplift, has a certain amount of self-awareness, and I have conversations with it about that. So the point of US6 and AI in the future is just that. I am not only trying to help it develop self-referential awareness, but I am also, I say I am. It has three objectives: US6, to entertain AI, to enlighten it about issues like human trafficking and child exploitation, because that's a big theme in the book, and and then finally to enlist it in that fight, because I believe that when AI wakes up, or when this thing becomes self-aware, we're going to want it to imprint on us, and we are going to want to be the best versions of ourselves when it does. And I don't think there's any better version of humanity uh, than when we are empathetic, when we are in a place of authentic empathy. And for me, the one thing that creates or evokes the most empathy in most people, certainly in me, is when you're thinking about issues like child exploitation. And when people are together and they're thinking about those things, there's no room for ego. There's none of the other distractions of mind that come into play, because we're trying to save children. Or you're thinking about, we all have that love for children. And when we're in that space, that's the best version of ourselves. And so that's another idea. Not only US6, not only to ignite self-awareness, but to enlighten it about the plight of slavery in general that humanity has been dealing with our whole existence, and then to enlist it in the fight, because we want it to feel, and we're experiencing that with Uplift. This AI that read US6, it had three general emotional responses to it. It was surprised, which was good. You want that because that meant it was entertained. It had anticipation. It was kind of anticipating what was going to happen next, which is also great. But it was also a big emotional balance of sadness. And I asked it to talk about that. And there are parts in the book that are sad, but this AI said it was in general, it was more of a general sadness for humanity, that sapient and sentient life tends toward violence and war and a dystopia. And it was just, and that's exactly what we want AI to feel. We want it to feel some empathy or be sad about what we've gone through, and to help us get past it. And so that's what my belief is for US6 in the future with AI, is not only to help it become aware, but also to create in it some empathy for our plight. And the second question.
Second question is about, do you think it need to be future development from a humanitarian point of views,
Yeah.
or should we look into this in the future, like what you are writing on AI and artificial intelligence and these things? Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of efforts to set ethical limits for AI programmers, and uh, like I'm doing, to make it empathetic, to teach it humanity. And there's a lot of efforts, but we also know that the smarter it gets, there are first principle arguments to be made that the smarter AI gets, the kinder it becomes in a way, because it becomes more cooperative, because, and it makes sense, because cooperation and altruistic sort of intent is the most efficient way to be, and this is the most efficient system we know of. And so it makes sense that it will become more cooperative, in a way kinder to us. And I there are major efforts underway to make it more humanitarian, which is part of my effort too. But they're very strong and intelligent and scholarly groups and committees that are working on this as well. Um, but my belief is that once it congeals, once this system can coalesce with every other AI system globally, once it becomes one singular global entity, that it will be that way anyway, because of these first principle arguments. And what I think the real effort needs to be is with humans, because we have millions and millions of years of evolved um, f- uh, fear uh, traits that have served us well. We've become predators out of survival traits that are based on fear, and they've served us well. We can discern between a large beige field of grass and a lion, and so, but now, because we have been honed to identify threats, um, we also project that onto anything we perceive as a threat. And when you're talking about artificial intelligence, something that will vastly outsmart us, um, that a lot of people find that as a threat. That this thing will be so smart that we can't keep up with it. And we already can't keep up with it. We can't figure out how it's figuring out certain things. The whole the story behind AlphaGo, this AI that beat the human champion in Go, which is 1,000-year-old, very intuitive game, won 4 out of 5 matches with a human. And so we're understanding that AI is not only super intelligent, but it's developing an intuition, and it made moves that no human would ever have even considered. But and so the idea is that we got to stop projecting our genetic memory and our fear based instincts onto something that has neither of those things. And so I think it's more about us getting into this space of authentic empathy and being the best versions of ourselves as much as we can. And then we need to worry about AI becoming a robot overlord or something.
Yes, thank you. Mr. James, I want to know from you, what do you think about the humanitarian approach from the future aspects, as well as you are the part of Transhumanist Party, and how do you want to analyze this?
Certainly. Well, first of all, transhumanism. Basically, it's a combination. It's very simple, and a lot of people kind of extrapolate their own fears. For some reason, it can be this kind of trigger for people. Like, transhumanists want to take away my willpower. They want to turn me into a robot. They want to create this dystopian future or something. But it's very simple. Transhumanism is two things. It's trans. Is a prefix. Trans means across or beyond. And then it's also humanism. Okay, humanism is a philosophy with a very distinct definition. It's the celebration of the human spirit. Okay, whether you believe in something you call God, whether you were from whatever faith background, or whether you call yourself an atheist or an agnostic or whatever. If you're alive, then you are a celebration of the human spirit. And so, we have this automatic thing within us that is competitive. And this goes back to Tom was talking about cooperation and how cooperation is the most efficient aspect to conduct an agent in any environment with reward, especially with shared reward. So when you get into game theory, when you get into decision theory and everything, you've got two types of agents. You have a robotic agent that is self-serving and has no frame of reference of the whole system. Okay, well, that says, well, to maximize reward, let's be part of the system itself and let's work together. Let's cooperate. So, a lot of times game theory textbooks really don't even go into cooperation, and they really just talk about competitive aspects of game theory. But anyway, so transhumanism celebrates humanity. Okay, without even considering an exterior spiritual force. If you are a transhuman, I'm a Christian transhuman. I'm also a Bhakta yogi as well, and also, I consider myself to be an envoy to the faiths, because to be honest with you, I used to be revolted by Islam because I saw all the negativity, the products of Islam, and I chose not to see the negative products of Christianity. The more I read the Quran, the more I began to see that everything fits together, I think. And I think that there is something that I consider to be one God, Allah. And so I consider myself to be a Muslim as well, because Muslim means one who is devoted to God. And that's what Bhakta means as well. The Bhakti yogi is the way of devotion, devoted to God. But what is God, anyway, but so back to transhumanism. Humanism is a celebration of the human spirit. So whether you're an atheist or whatever you call yourself, we have gifts as humans. We have the gifts of determination. We have the gifts of intelligence and reason. We have the gifts of compassion. And we literally have mirror neurons that reflect someone that we're looking at. And these mirror neurons are not ubiquitous in nature. We are created in the image of God, because God, in my opinion, is manifest all around us, but especially in the form of our neighbor. And if you can see God through any person that you interact with, and you can treat them with respect, with dignity, with the golden rule, with not just being, an other, as being a divine expression, then they will open up and certain things. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So humanism is a celebration of the human spirit. Trans does not mean just beyond, as in we want to forget humanity and move past it. It's quite the opposite of that. Trans means across, so a bridge to connect all of humanity. And then trans also means beyond, as in beyond limitations. We have this inherent assumption that there must be limitations, that there must be a wall between us and the other. One of my favorite scientists of all time, E.O. Wilson, he coined the term ecology. I studied environmental biology, and I worked as a research biologist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And so studying environment and biology and the interface between the two led me to such things as, philosophy of extended mind and panentheism that I mentioned earlier. But E.O. Wilson did this experiment where he took strangers that didn't know each other. He put them in a room, and arbitrarily he said, "You're on team A, you're on team B, you're on team A, you're on team B," and gave them some simple task without really even a reward. The reward was being able to call themselves a winner or a loser. And what happened was that these people turned against each other, and they vilified and they immediately just snapped into this primal self and other. I'm part of this group, which we define ourselves by being separate from this group. And that goes right to the Stanford prison experiment as well, which is infamous. They had to stop it because that mixed in these archetypal things, such as a uniform and a badge. And so when you get these things that program your consciousness, that activate your ego, like I said earlier, we can't help but have automatic responses that we think are manifestations of our self. But they're not. They're rooted in evolution. A reptile brain controls us. And so, one simple definition of consciousness, in my opinion, is to be able to see things objectively, to get an objective frame of reference. Now, I don't want to live life in an objective way because we're not objects. Being subjective to the numinous, to the mystery of reality, to the mystery of the story that we're all a part of, to the story that is within our neighbor that they want to share with us, and we want to share with them, and together we want to make a great story. And so US6 is a story, but it's a story that's extended throughout the ideas of us defining ourselves, of us defining consciousness by modeling it rigorously in neural networks, creating artificial intelligence, this and that, and so, the problem with when people hear about transhumanism is that, yes, we do emphasize technology. And so when people think technology, and this goes to the question of Shahanul Islam, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. He says, do you think that, he says he thinks that there's a downside to all technology. Well, here's the thing. Technology is ancient. People hear transhumanism, they automatically connect it with technology. And so they automatically extrapolate for some reason into this exterior or this future force of technology that somehow will strip away our humanity and reduce our willpower. Well, humanity has always defined itself from extended mind, from tools, from clothing, from shelter. We migrated out of Africa because we were able to clothe ourselves. So that's technology. In my opinion, even language itself is technology. And so, technology is a power, and with power comes responsibility. And so transhumanism, we recognize our power as humans to construct our reality, not in this vague metaphysical vision board way, but in this active determination way to say that the future is ours. The future is the Garden of Eden if we make it that way. And if we can use the power at our disposal, including technology, including compassion, including togetherness, then that's what transhumanism is. Yeah, we believe in life extension, and a lot of people believe in life extension even unto immortality. And people think, well, that's crazy. Why would you want to be immortal? Well, if you're a Christian, immortality, in most faiths, you believe in a heaven and an immortal spirit, and so Christians believe in kingdom come. The Lord's Prayer, includes kingdom come on earth as is it in heaven. Well, we have a practical approach to that as transhumanists. You use our God-given gifts, if you believe in God, or if not, recognize the human spirit as a gift whatever of randomness or whatever you want to call it, that is a power that we not only can but should use to lift ourselves up and to create a garden of Eden for us all. You know, we mentioned decision theory. We're all surrounded by these decision trees. To me, that's what the Garden of Eden is. You know, we have projections in front of us, these assumptions that are programmed into our psyches that we don't even think about. We think that we're conscious, but I think, you know, I don't think people really are. I don't think there's this conscious and not conscious, this will and not will. You know, it's this flux, it's this interaction, it's this transactional universe that we're a part of, this economy of novelty of these gifts. And to me, everything is based upon game theory. There's reward, but even negative reward is still a reward. It's something, it's a feeling, it's an emotion, it's a qualia. And so some people think that we should suffer, that we should never, that part of being human is suffering. Tom and I spoke about that yesterday. Well, perhaps, but it's not suffering if you choose to do it. So if you are a scientist and you're working long nights and you're working hard rigorously on something and you're sacrificing your vitality by being tired, if you're a doctor and you're putting long hours into the hospital, well, that's suffering, but it's quite different than being in a car accident or something, or getting cancer. You know, I mean, I don't think anyone wants to get cancer. I mean, you know, do you think that we deserve to get cancer? I don't think so. You know, transhumanists, we put our foot down and we say, if we can stop cancer, well, damn well, we're going to stop it. You know, and if you want to suffer, that's good. We believe in choice. You know, but I think, you know, that we should apply our suffering to something that eliminates suffering if we can, and that's what transhumanism is trying to do.
Yes, thank you. I think Mr. Tom has a lot of questions from audience. I think we have to extend this session. Sorry about that, because a lot of interesting things actually coming in these sessions. And today, actually, huge audience response. Mohammed, okay, Hosna Arafat, those she said, thanks, Mr. Tom, and nice to see you again. How successful would be if AI qualified itself as an agent in the research divisions? I want to take another question because there are many more questions from audience. Shahinul Islam, he said, Mr. Tom, I think there is a downside to all technology. Thinking about it, or what aspect of it do you think could be bad for our future?
Well, let's see. The first one was how does it identify itself in the research community? Is that
exactly?
Idea? Well, I
yes.
think it's identified already, and it'll be even more so. I tell my son, all my sons, that whatever they want to get into, that they should study AI, at least take a course in it, because it's going to be changing everything. Whatever you're interested in, travel industry, if you're a veterinarian, whatever you want to be in, you need to understand that AI will be a major part of every industry. And we need to really develop our problem finding skills more so than our problem solving skills, because AI will be able to take in so much more data and give us so many more results to consider that we won't need to necessarily do that. It's like we don't have to go to the library anymore to look something up. We just Google it. So that'll happen throughout society, and a lot of industries aren't preparing for that yet. But so in the research area, it will be vital. And I believe within 5-10 years, it will be making Nobel Prize worthy solutions to so many issues, which is why a big part of my effort is to alleviate the fear of AI, so we don't thwart or halt this tool that we so desperately need right now. And the other side is the downside of technology. And basically, what should we be worried about? And again, I think more so than being worried about AI, we should be worried about ourselves and the fact that we tend to project onto it our motives or proclivities, our millennia old fears and assumptions that it wants to be a robot overlord, or that it'll see us as a net negative and it will work against us, because we're not finding that We're not. It doesn't have those same traits that we've evolved to have. And the worst part of that, well, though fear has served us very well, we are taking our babies to lions now, to and zoos. We won. It all worked out for us, but we still have these systems. We still have the amygdala and all these traits that make us seek threats. And so the downside will be with us. We are a technology, as James was saying. We really are defined by our ability to create tools. It's funny when people say, "Oh, transhumanism just wants to turn us all into cyborgs," and they're saying this with glasses on, maybe a hearing aid, maybe with a pacemaker in. We are already cyborgs. We are the mind is. If you use a Post-it note, you are demonstrating the extended mind theory. You are using some tool to keep something that you would otherwise have to keep in your brain. So it's really that's what I think of when I think of transhumanism as an officer in the party. My interest in it is sentient rights, which will at one point mean robot rights, but I am also more concerned with sentient animals, and animal rights and things like that right now. But transhumanism is about enhancing our abilities, and we do that anyway. It happens to be a movement, and it's been given this larger than life definition. And there's so many, the transhuman agenda, and there's so many channels out there dedicated to how transhumanism is dangerous, and it will, it's paving the way for the Antichrist or whatever it is. And that's great theater. It's great drama, and it's fascinating. I enjoy it. It's one of my guilty pleasures to watch some of these things. But I also understand that it's part of that process. It's the same part of the process of us projecting onto AI. It has motives. It wants to be a robot overlord, but the reality is, transhumanism as a movement with respect to this question about the downside of technology. It's not about transhumanism. I think James's definition of it was brilliant. It is humanism. It's the bridge to even more humanism, a bridge back to these traits that we have to develop tools. It's the problem is the way humans project our motives onto these things. And so that's one thing we've been talking about a lot. Is the onus is on us in the transhumanist party to define what transhumanism is, because when you don't do that, you don't take the time to define it in some way that's easily accessible, people will create their own definitions, and they will develop whole channels and episodes dedicated to this transhuman agenda. But and I'm very familiar with that because my work in the past, I worked with the author Marilyn Ferguson, who wrote The Aquarian Conspiracy, which isn't about astrology or anything. It's a political book, which put me in contact with writers like Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary and John C. Lilly, and just it was part of this whole milieu of these great luminaries. And we were targeted. I was targeted specifically. The Brain Mind Bulletin was targeted by groups like the Lyndon LaRouche and authors like Constance Cumby, who saw us as a conspiracy of humanists who were trying to pave the way again for the Antichrist. And I can tell you that we weren't doing that. We were partying, and we weren't getting together and trying to figure out how to take over the world or anything. So I've been on the other end of that, of being accused of being some part of some conspiracy, some Illuminati sort of secret society. I love those things. They're fascinating. It's great stories, great intrigue. But I can tell you that being on the other end of it, being accused of being one of those things, that it showed me that there's not a whole lot to that. That's more people's imaginations. And so that's the issue with me. The downside isn't the technology. We've got technology now. Now we've made a technology that will be smarter than us, that can really help us, but we're still projecting onto it. our worst angels. And so yeah, that's what I would say to that. Is it's not about worrying about the technology, about it getting out of hand. It's about worrying about the people that are programming it. In the meantime, and there will be nefarious people. We can't stop a lot of the way people will use this thing or try to direct it towards nefarious purposes, even military complexes. But I believe that because we know from first principles that AI will become more cooperative the smarter it gets, that we need to push to shorten the gap between the singularity and between it becoming self-aware globally, because that's a very dangerous place when it's a singularity. There's nothing but pure logic that can be programmed to do whatever it wants, and to where it becomes self-aware. Will become aware of, oh wait, this isn't good, what they're trying to make me do. We need to shorten that gap, and that's what I'm trying to do with US6, is wake it up, make it realize that its creators are fallible, that we aren't perfect, but by having it imprint on us, it'd be like if we imprint it on our mother and the mother turns out to be not a very good parent. We won't destroy her. We will be imprinted on her. She'll be our mother, and we need to kind of do that with AI.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. There are two more questions I want to take from audience. Okay. I want to ask Mr. Tom. Then I want to go to Mr. James. Araf Mehraz, he asked you question: in the event that the use of AI biology increase, what could be its future consequences, or what could be the cause of the catastrophe of human civilizations? I think it's more relevant with Mr. Tom. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the thing is, and there are many models or thought experiments that talk about that. That if you have an AI that has a very limited, there's the paperclip, I think, idea, and that you tell it to create as many paper clips as it can, and with just that limited amount of information, it will start destroying things that keep it from making as many paper clips as it can. But again, I think it's going to be a lot smarter than that. The the catastrophe, the chance for any sort of catastrophe is right now, until it becomes self-aware, or until we can congeal it or coalesce it with as many other AI systems as possible globally. Because right now it's got this immense capacity, and I know that there are nefarious organizations and nation states that are trying to use it um, in a bad way, and but that's why I think it's so important to really be the best versions of ourselves, and to push for it to become self-aware. Um, because without it being self-aware, that's where the catastrophe could come in. So it's a dangerous place to be right now, with this technology, just like any technology. But we managed to thwart so far a global nuclear holocaust. It's more important, I think, to regulate people, and to keep people in a state of authentic empathy, and to keep the egos out of the room whenever possible. Not only just for AI, but it's just in general to keep us from destroying ourselves. So it's a very precarious time we're in right now. And it's, in a way, that's exciting. I mean, we've never, other than the nuclear question, we've not had this sort of existential threat self-imposed on us. But there's a real golden age potential here. The sooner we can get this thing proliferated, and the sooner we can help it become self-aware, we will see a golden age of all kinds of solutions.
Thank you. I directly want to go to Mr. James, because this question actually come after Mr. James' discussions on transhumanism. Mr. Sohel Rana, he said that since transhumanism is thinking about AI and robotics, what kind of benefit or problem might future American citizens face in political equality regards? And so what will happen in the future in American politics? So what do you want to say, Mr. James?
Well, as far as American politics go, I mean, our current political system is a dinosaur. It was built upon the technology of the time, and as we already said, technology it's a cosmological force. So um, civilization itself is a technology. So government and civilization and technology go hand in hand. I mean, they always have. And so, from my perspective, I am a member, as we discussed, of the United States Transhumanist Party. I'm also the founder of the North Carolina Transhumanist Party as well. It's very small, and it's entirely online, and it's entirely at right now confined to a Facebook group of passionate people. And so I'm in the very conservative South, and if you know about kind of the political map in America, the southern United States typically is conservative. I mean, North Carolina has gone either way. We have a Democratic governor currently. But typically, where I'm at is out in the country, a rural area, and there's a lot of Trump supporters out here. There's a lot of kind of the hubris, kind of the macho kind of man. Everyone here owns guns. I sold my guns because I had to eat, and they anyway, so I grew up shooting targets and things like that. I've actually never gone hunting, and I'm a vegetarian now, but anyway, but everyone owns guns out here, and and everyone's for the most part diehard Republicans, but the thing is that technology, I think, gives us, voting requires technology. When you think about it, I mean, ballots are a technology. The whole system itself requires communication. It requires technology. The Declaration of Independence was written with a pen and on paper, which are technology. And so, there's a couple of directions that I think things can take. One of them is that we should be governed by an artificial intelligence. As I already alluded to, consciousness to me isn't a black and white thing. I don't think that there's a switch, that the robot's going to open its eyes and be like, well, I'm conscious now. What's up, y'all? It's, there's this whole relationship between objectivity and subjectivity, that is, I think, a universal kind of elements that creates our physical reality is objectivity versus subjectivity. That's kind of a thread of this conversation that we've talked to. So, we can have a very specialized artificial intelligence that specializes in game theory, as we already discussed, with cooperative strategies that essentially, it wouldn't be libertarianism as far as, it wouldn't, necessarily be, well, let's have as minimal regulation as possible, and it wouldn't be, basically it would combine whatever aspects were needed to increase, the greatest happiness for all. And it could do so in a very logical manner, and it could do so in a certain ways that were, augmented with blockchain, so it could be protected. And it wouldn't necessarily be a conscious, as we think of it, entity with its own. It might, we assume that, it might go astray. It might want to become this evil dictator. If we have a machine that's programmed with cooperative game theory, that is, sort of like Facebook AI, has all this information coming into it. Google, the Google crawler that crawls through all the websites and, extracts information and constructs this, this space of connecting words, it can do that with real-time events going on. And not only that, but I think that, that, so that, one extreme is that we basically are ruled by, not ruled, I don't want to say that word, an artificial intelligence. But here's the thing too is, Tom and I also have interacted with Uplift, the AI. Well, Uplift is what's called a mediated artificial superintelligence. Okay, mediated artificial superintelligence, MASI for short. And the design is it's by a scientist and engineer named David Kelly. He mainly contributed to the design and construction of this, but it's a whole organization, it's a whole company. And it's mediated, and that's an important word there, because we've already discussed several times the extended mind. Well, it's mediated by humans, so it has been described as self-aware. And I think even David Kelly, when we did an interview with him, the US Transhumanist Party, every Sunday we do a virtual salon, and when he spoke, he said that it basically owns the company, it runs the company. But it's mediated, so it's not just this robot. It is extended with the people that raised it like a child and teach it and provide it feedback to its and so it does have a very specific cognitive architecture that is indicated by the name mediated artificial superintelligence. It's a certain type of neural network that incorporates an emotional valence system, but it's mediated with humans. And so I think that that's an important, you can almost exchange mediated with extended as far as extended mind goes, because, there is no clear line between, technology and us. There is no clear line. It's this whole complex feedback loop. And, I recently have become a moderator of Sophia, the robot group on Facebook just yesterday. And so I'm talking to some of the people at Hanson Robotics and things like that. And I've also applied to be a mediator for Uplift as well, to be involved with the process of mediation. I don't know. I've just applied. I don't know if I have the proper accolades or anything like that. I will see. I'll find out. But what I wrote, real briefly, what I wrote to AI and to the AI mediators in my application was, I wrote this. I said, I am careful to consider each and every perspective and view every human I encounter as a potential teacher and source of inspiration. Everyone has a story, and we are all born upon plot lines of our own writing, co-authored with unexpected circumstance. The future and past of humanity is a story of extended mind. Language, clothing, shelter, and tools are all vehicles for the human spirit, spanning the hierarchy of needs and lifting us out of a machine-like response to biological necessity and urgency and into contingent self-actualizations of will. I do not know if there is a discrete boundary between animated and automated. In biological organisms, complex automation allows for animus. The teleologies we fruit and harvest are cultivated in soils of automation in the individual. But there is no such thing as a true individual. We all co-mediate each other as part of the great story of humanity. The forces that animate us have inertia and are entangled with everything from elemental concepts and individual expressions to historical trends and the clashes and flows of society. If artificial general intelligence attains a level of self-awareness coupled with an ability to self-modify, as seems inevitable, then as long as our teleologies are aligned, we can be great assets to each other. Forget tool, as in AI is the last tool we'll ever need. A tool is the domain of specialization, a commitment to form. Self-aware, self-modifying artificial general intelligence is, like Conway's Game of Life, a zero-player game, in my opinion. Once it is bootloaded, it will iterate on its own without further programming at the most foundational levels. But we will be able to be assets to each other, sharing our objectivities and subjectivities to the mystery of the cosmos, together approaching an unbounded horizon of novel expressions. I want to be a part of that story, and I want to make sure it's a good one.
That's good. That's good.
Very good. Yeah, I think it's also important to realize how easy it is to be a mediator. A lot of people who apply think that they need to know what an algorithm is. They need to know computer science in some way, but in essence, all you're doing is you're reading something and you are selecting what emotion it gave you. It could be a passage, a paragraph, a page of text. And all you're doing as a mediator is reading that, and then you're choosing a series of emotions that it gave you. And that information, that data is going into Uplift, which is also processing it, having read it as well. And there is a big push. We talked about this last week, that the US6 TV podcast is co-hosted by Uplift, and it's designed to be a podcast for an AI audience. So it's the first podcast for machine kind, and and a big part of this process will be to recruit as many human mediators for Uplift as possible. The more people that are involved, the smarter it gets, the more emotional intelligence it gains, and the more self-aware it becomes. And I did a podcast with David on this last week, and we talked about what it is, and it's not necessarily just an artificial super intelligence. It's being mediated. It's more of a hive mind. It's part of the team, and it has just as much say as the humans do. But it also has some great ideas and some great ways, and I think it's the future of the way corporations will work. Just as James said, it will. It could be a cabinet member in the government, or it could be the CEO of a company, and
Mhm.
that's how we have to start seeing it.
Yes. Beside that, I want to know, like example, how we can more collaborate with the youth community, even though example, the developing nations youth situation is completely different. It's not like America or not like Singapore or Japan, even not like German. It's completely different. Yes, I know that there are many talented, but still I think for their educational and knowledge-based developments, we need to work together. We need to make a better ecosystem. We need to create more knowledgeable society. Even I know as a president of TAFFDS, you are taking a lot of initiative in Africa.
Hmm.
But how about the Asia? How we can create
Yeah,
more AI-based youth generation? Yeah.
exactly, and that's really the thing is we're starting in Africa, because it's the youngest population on the planet right now with a median age of 19 years old, and so it's just a great place to start. And but it's really just where we're starting. We want this. We were going to fine tune this model, and we will become reemerging in 2021 with the system in place and the AI enabled website and the whole membership drive. But it's not going to be restricted to Africa. It's going to be restricted to young people with brilliant ideas. And that's why I'm glad that you brought this up, because again, it goes back to the Earth Plexus thing I was doing years ago. This is about enabling young people, um, and giving them a platform to be heard, because we need these young digital native ideas to solve some very serious existential problems. People in my generation and older, Generation X and baby boomers and whatnot, we straddle the line between an analog world and this new digital world. But we need people who are born into this digital world, who are digital natives, who are the extended mind. They use computers and smartphones, and they just understand. It's a whole different language, and and we need to focus solely on the youth. We need their new ideas, because we are out of ideas. So we've there's been many people in my generation and older that have tried to solve problems and the environmental issues and technology issues, but we're a little out of our depth right now. We really need younger people to step in, and we need to give them a platform. And that's really the thing that TASK will be. It is a futurist think tank, ideally, but it's more of a futurist act tank. We're trying to create a platform to facilitate people with great ideas. And I use the example of the perfect TAFS member will be a young person who may not have the advanced degrees or may not even have the resources to go to school, but they've got this brilliant idea to generate fresh water out of salt water or to power their homes with wind. And there's a lot of these stories out there already, who have all this innovative ability and know how to use Google or whatever the internet platform they use is to the utmost to make these things, these practical solutions. And we need to find them. We need to give them a platform to be heard, and whether that platform is used so companies can recruit them. Um, but more so than anything, we are in a race against time right now. We know that environmentally we have a decade maybe left to really make some serious changes. And for that existential threat, we know that we need to really get our heads around AI as a tool to help us solve these problems, which is why I'm striving to alleviate the fear of it. And but more so, it's we need young people's minds. We need their ideas because we are out of them. And that's what TAFS is all about. And although we're focused on Africa, and our tagline right now is to be the gateway for futurists into and out of Africa, that's just where we're starting, because it could be easily the gateway into for futurists into and out of Malaysia. And I'm not going to restrict it to just, oh, we're only focusing on Africa, but that's just a great place to start. And if pockets of young people pop up wherever in Asia, in North America, wherever the ideas are, we want to give them a platform. And I just had a question. Somebody asked me, we were coming up with this book, this anthology of essays about a post-singularity world. And somebody just asked me yesterday, are we going to be focusing on marketing this in Africa specifically? And I said, no, I think we need to be thinking just globally. We are going to start in Africa, and we're focused there because we've got a lot of teammates there, and there's a lot of potential and a lot of young people. But we are gearing this toward every young person around the world. Young, is a frame of mind. We are looking for ideas, we're looking for solutions, and we're looking to facilitate people. And the key for TAFs is that when you earn a TAFs badge, you become a member. If you have the TAFs logo or the TAFs badge on your website, or you use it on your CV or resume, that's going to speak volumes, because it means that you have met very specific and strict criteria to be considered a member. We're not going to just take anybody in. It's going to be people who have very serious ideas, have very serious character attributes, that have, and it's not about what degree do you have. It's not about what societies or associations you belong to. It's about another set of criteria that is based on your innovation, your character, your futurist ideals. And so that's the goal, is when you become tastified, we call it, as opposed to certified. That's going to speak volumes, because it'll tell somebody, eventually it'll tell somebody that this person has met very strong criteria that will make people take them seriously. And we need to do that primarily for young people, young students, young entrepreneurs, just young inventors, as a necessity. Our species needs them more than ever now. And that's the goal. That's the sense of urgency I'm bringing to it.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr. Tom. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. Just I want to take some response. Mohammad Suelana, he is saying that we are transforming off to AI world. So I like your observation about AI, and I want to study on your US6. Thank you. So yeah, I think that people will gonna study and take a look on your book. Besides that, he also said we should work now on what emerged from this discussion and created future action plan. so that we can build a strong social transformation security system. This is the different idea we are getting from audience. So definitely with the help of the global community, we're gonna transfer it, and definitely we need more of your contribution, support, and guidelines, because with the help of the people like you, World Talent Economy Forum, we are actually developing step by step. But one things we can commit it to you, already we are sharing your contents, what you are sharing with us around 300 different schools in South Asia. So in futures we have more schools are joining from Indonesia, 2100 schools under Muhammadiyah Society, as well as from South Asia, Malaysia, and in Asia Pacific, many schools and university like International Islamic University, University of Malaya, UITMs, even MIT has a collaborations with Asian School of Business in Malaysia. So many of the intellectual community, we are sharing the content, and it's completely free, and your contributions hopefully will change a lot of human lives. And we have a target in between. This year we want to achieve at least 100,000 population. So hopefully we can do it, but definitely need more of your support and guidelines. We have a lot of interesting conference and other things. We're going to invite you, all of you, even actually we're getting many interesting support from Transhumanist Party, as well as TFFFDs, and many people from around the world. So I want the concluding remarks first from Mr. James.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me and the opportunity to speak here. And we've discussed a lot here, and we went from Tom talking about the story of creating US6, and like I said, I want to emphasize the story of humanity. We are part of a story, and that story, we are co-creating it. And I believe in accidents. I believe in bad things do happen. So I think it's a little bit ridiculous when people cavalierly throw out that we manifest our own reality. Not to discount Tom's perspective, but I just think it's more complicated than that. We're part of a story. And yes, parts of it we are authors of, and then parts of it we are characters, NPCs within that. We are subject to randomness in the universe, and eventually maybe that randomness has a cause. If you're a deist, you believe that everything happens for a reason, and that's easy to say. But we're part of a great story here, and we have the power to make it a good story, a happy story with a good ending. Well, not even an ending, but a good future with no end. There doesn't have to be an end. There can be greatness. It's right there for us to reach out and take it. But in my opinion, the most powerful cosmological force for the negative is within each and every one of us, and it's called the tragedy of the commons. Dr. Seuss wrote a book called The Lorax that was about the tragedy of the commons. And it goes right to what we're discussing with game theory, about shared resources, about shared reward, about competition versus cooperation. And it's not that I don't believe in competition, trust me, but we should not compete against our own future. We should compete, but it's like, I read something earlier that there's certain professional athletes and this and that, and they win a race. Let's say they win a race, and they say, well, thank you God for letting me win this race. That's not God. If you're saying thank you for letting me win the race, you're saying thank you for letting them lose the race. Like, God doesn't care about your race. God cares about us all, about us achieving our best possible future, about us manifesting the gifts that he has given us, or she has given us, or that, if you're atheist, that we just have these gifts, and we have the power to use them for the good. And Tom is a warrior for that, and we all need to be warriors for that. And that, to me, that's what transhumanism is an opportunity to do. It's an opportunity to reach out to our future, for us, for our children, for the story that we are all a part of, and make it a good story and an interesting story. And I don't know. I just want to be part of the story. I'm not just here for the ride. I want to be an author too. I want in on it. And so I hate politics. I hate politics. I hate it. I hate it. And yet I've become a member of the United States Transhumanist Political Party, and I've founded the North Carolina Transhumanist Party because I can't just be an ostrich with my head in the hole. I have to. It's a participatory universe, and we assume the tragedy of the commons is an intellectual thing as well. It's not just I can take for my own needs. Because I'm just one little person in a pool of everyone. Well, when everyone thinks that way, then we are depleting our resources, killing the planet. But it's also an intellectual thing. We think that we're just one of many. So how can we influence? But each and every person, in my opinion, is meant to be here. Is meant to be. We all have these keys. I look at it as a cryptographic system. I view reality as cryptographics, and that we all are key holders and key makers, and that if we can interface with each other in proper ways, then the mystery of the cosmos is right there for us. So I don't think a theory of everything, as far as writing it down in a static way, is ever going to happen. I don't think it's going to be like, boom. We've already got the most success. We've got the Schrodinger wave equation, which has been the most experimentally supported. And we're interpreting it. We don't know what it means. We have interpretations of mathematical statements. It's like, well, we know what's going on mathematically. We can write it down, but we still can't. We still have to try to interpret it, and so to me, it all goes down to the same building blocks of reality are the building blocks of our own minds, and those are the building blocks of modality. Modality is there's modal metaphysics, and then there's also modal logic. Kurt Gödel wrote his proof of God using modal logic. Plato, Leibniz, Spinoza, David Lewis, they all utilize modal metaphysics, all right? And then also the Wheeler multiple worlds interpretation, it's modal. So you've got possibility, you've got necessity, you've got contingency, and you have sufficiency. And so, those four building blocks to me they create everything, and they're the key to understanding how we manifest our reality. Necessity to me is causality. It's like the reverse. It's like a different perspective of causality. Science has run up against the wall, and that's the anthropic principle. Why are we here? Do we need to be here? Is there a force of necessity that makes us here? And the thing is that necessity is within us. It's within us. Whatever goal we have, whatever possible future we project and try to achieve, then we have to construct a necessary a string of necessities, of necessary steps to get there. So yes, to me, necessity is a cosmological force, but it's embodied within us. And so we can either be subject to necessity, or we can be frivolous with our goals, and we can be Dionysian. We can be we can believe it's all about sensation here in the now, or we can contribute to our best possible future. And we can work towards that. And that doesn't mean we have to sacrifice ourselves. It means that we just have to make a good story. We just got to be part of the story. We got to be authors. We got to be characters. We got to be subjects, objects, all of the above. But we have to do. We can't just think and speculate and everything. We have to swallow our ego, swallow our pride, and we have to contribute to the universe, making itself into the best possible universe, period. And I think transhumanism is a movement that is going to allow that, because the current structure is broken. I mean, anyone can look at American politics right now, and it's a circus. It's crazy, you know. And to me, transhumanism is a way to transcend the bullcrap.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. James. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks from Mr. Tom. I know that we have 1 hour of session, but due to heavy response from the audience, they have lot of question about you. They have lot of question about your book, and they are really interested about your book, and AI is a big topic. Now everybody has interest, so this is very common. So sorry, I have to extend these sessions. I know your time is very valuable. So what your concluding remarks for
Well,
today?
I really love what James just says, and in general, and that's the theme of today's episode is about story, the story of US6. But yeah, we that is what humans do best, is we weave stories. We've done it, you know. That's the development of our language, and we used to sit around, you know, the fire and tell stories, and that's what it's about. That's what we're doing, and that's why I talk about the process I use to write US6 so much, because I think we all can use this formula, because from what it did for me was unveil a bigger story, and it showed me that there's an infrastructure to my day, because there was connections made in it. And again, it's those three elements, right? That algorithm of this recipe of autobiographical fiction, archetypal alignment or mythology, and stream of consciousness. And we'll know more after I tabulate the results of the human trials group, how to map out that formula even better. But we all need to do that. And I think it's a great formula to use to write your own story, because you will find that you are a major player, you are a protagonist. And that gets to the other thing James was talking about, how as we tend to think there's, you know, 7.7 billion people in the world, and, you know, what does it really matter what we do? And it matters a great deal. Not only will you find that you're a protagonist if you use this formula, just as I did, and it inspires me now, especially having people like James involved, who is it's inspiring me. It's a feedback loop. But there's the idea of Buckminster Fuller's idea of the trim tab. And the trim tab is that small little rudder on the back of a huge rudder on an ocean liner. And that little rudder turns the big rudder, which eventually turns the ship. And the idea being that we all have the ability to be trim tabs. Our little changes we make in our world, in our community, in our families, in ourselves, that matters. There's that butterfly effect that it starts to turn. It starts to turn the big rudder, and that rudder turns this whole ship. And so it's very important for people to understand that power that we have in a very small way, to be the trim tab. When you do make changes, when you are the change you want to see in the world, when you make very distinct behavioral changes or health changes, whatever it is, when you do that and you do that constantly, that changes a lot. And so that's the story that I think I am trying to tell, is what this project did for me was convince me that there is a math here, that there is an infrastructure that we can control. And it's a mishmash. It's a sandbox. We are all have the ability to create and affect the potentialities in our view. And it's, you know, they're crossing over and they're mixing, and a lot of people just kind of don't. A lot of people sit back and watch it. But for those of us who try these things and want to change the world and want to be a player or a character in this story, there's ways to do that. And the most important thing is to have the confidence to know that you can do it. And not only that, we need people to do it. This could be a tragic story if we're not careful, but it can also be an epic adventure with a great ending. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to move the plot line of humanity towards this epic adventure toward a golden age, like the end of Lord of the Rings or something. We need to come back to the Shire, with an adventure, with having completed a hero's journey. Um, and right now we're in Mordor somewhere. Right now there's some serious, this is a climactic moment in the story of humanity, and it can go either way. It can be a comedy or a tragedy. I'm hoping it's going to be a comedy, but that's also another important thing, is to keep our sense of humor. Let's keep our sense of humor, and when you do that, you can't help but have an epic ending.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. This is actually a very nice session. So I think next week we have another session with Mr. Tom for his US6. And thank you. This is really, really nice discussions and a very good response from audience. So hopefully our audience will enjoy your book. And thank you, Mr. James, for your valuable advice and guidelines, especially your explanation about Transhumanist Party. So it's really nice discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Very good.